Hey y'all, it's your girl, Coach Kinsley. Today we're going to talk about protein balance.
Protein balance? I haven't heard of it before, but it sounds important. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
It's Fitness Fix with Coach Kinsley, your award winning personal trainer and nutritionist, here to share her expertise and experience to give you a kickstart on your fitness journey. Let's get started with Coach Kinsley.
Remember to always consult your physician before starting any nutrition or fitness regimen.
We've talked a little bit about what protein is and what protein does for us already. So, just a quick recap. Proteins are crucial for the regulation and maintenance of the body, especially in our case of being fitness enthusiasts. We're talking about maintenance in regards to building and maintaining muscle mass or lean body tissue.
Coach, you have always preached the value of protein in nutrition, and I have always taken it seriously because as I get further into this journey, which is for me every day, making sure I have my proteins is something that you've always preached is important. I've always taken as important. Yeah, I love lean body tissue, Coach. And one of our faithful listeners, my sister Meredith out in Seattle, said that she didn't really start losing body fat until she started developing lean muscle. And so I'm sure the two go hand in hand. Is that right?
Yeah, surely that's right. It costs more calories to exist with muscle. Building muscle, which you'll need to eat your proteins to do, is going to help you lose weight, but also keep off the weight that you've lost.
So you said this was protein balance. So what does that mean specifically?
So, protein balance or protein equilibrium is when your protein intake is equal to your protein losses or your protein that is being used. Then you would be in protein balance. Does that make sense?
A little bit, but I'm not sure how I calculate my protein used.
So, we're not going to get into too much math here today.
Good, because I was terrible at math. I'm an English major.
Well, don't you worry. We're just going to talk about positive protein balance, protein equilibrium, and then negative protein balance. So, there are boards and national academies that have set an acceptable macronutrient distribution range. So, the one for protein, it's a huge range. Daily, you'll want 10 to 35% of your total calories coming from protein.
That makes sense. I think the ratio that we've always talked about is, and I know I'm not saying this right, but for me, it's half protein, half carb, and then the rest in fats. I think about there is if I match my protein and my carbs, I'm going to get the fats, and it's going to be about 20%.
Oh man, Mike, I can tell that you were an English major because half and half equals 100%. So how would you have room for any fat if 50 was carbs and 50 was proteins?
Yeah, I like to give 110% of all my effort.
Well, I can support that. Always giving everything you got. So, in our case, where we are weightlifting and trying to build muscle, it is more important for us to be on the higher range of the percent. Closer to 30 to 35% of our total calories should be from protein. The split that you're talking about is a split that I like to do. Okay. So, what you're talking about is a split that I like to do I call the 40-30-30. So it's 40% of your calories coming from carbohydrates, which is your main source of fuel, and then 30% of your total caloric intake coming from proteins, which are your main building blocks, and then 30% that's left coming from fats. So you're 40-30-30.
Not 50-50-20.
No, not quite that. Now, the protein recommendation is 10% to 35% of your total calories coming from protein. This is a humongous range. Like 10% is going to give you much different physique than 35%. And the reason this is so wide is because your lifestyle has a lot to do with your protein needs. Like we've mentioned, and we will continue to mention, protein is used for maintenance and building, but it's also used for other functions like blood clotting, hormone and enzyme production, and even transportation through the bloodstream. There's cellular requirements of proteins for every component. Just for us, those who are really passionate about fitness, lean body tissue is the most important. But while you are doing things like weightlifting or even an endurance sport like cross country, your protein needs are going to be higher than those who aren't breaking down their muscles on the daily.
Learning that the protein that I ingest also repairs muscles as well as building them. That was one of the important things that I learned from you, Coach. For me, that kind of was a ding, ding, ding moment where I was like, oh, I need to find extra ways to get protein. Coach, were you aware that fish it has a lot of protein in
Fish?
it? Your emphasis on finding whole food sources for me that are enjoyable, which fish is now.
Woohoo!
Maybe next year I'll try some other source of protein that I'm not really down with these days. Grilled fish fillet, chock full of protein, is a regular rotation in my diet.
Support it. Love it. Having protein in all of your meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, will put you in a good spot to potentially have that protein equilibrium or your protein balance, where your protein intake matches your protein losses to maintain your state of protein equilibrium. So, a healthy adult is going to have that protein equilibrium where your protein intake is the same as your protein losses to maintain your state. And the distribution of your protein throughout your meals is important. I know that's more tough than just getting all of your protein at the end of the day or all your protein, have 12 eggs in the morning. It is more beneficial to spread your protein evenly throughout the day because your protein needs are going to be even throughout the day. When we talked about it in our intro to protein episode, we were talking about how protein synthesis is more of an all or nothing situation. So, when you have your muscle that is trying to repair itself, you need a complete protein or you need all of your amino acids available at the same time to get that synthesis. And amino acids are what your protein is made out of. If you want to learn more about that, I would suggest you go back and listen to our intro to protein episode. We're talking more about the balance of it. So, healthy adult, your intake is going to be the same as your output. But there are moments in our life where we want a positive protein balance, where we want more protein than what we are losing.
I tend to keep a balance because I know I like to burn carbs because I have sort of resolved, Coach, lately to lift heavy. I guess it's progressive overload where I do sets and just get heavier as I go through each set. So I feel like I need to burn those carbs, have the proteins to balance it. I'd have to have a whole lot of protein to go over on that. So I'm interested to hear why I need to do that or what the situation would be where I'd have way more protein than carbs.
So, I didn't say more protein than carbs, I said more protein intake than protein output.
Oh, okay. That's the difference. I see.
Yes, you still want to be with the 10% to the 35% of your caloric intake coming from protein, but there are just times where you want to be closer to the 35%. So, those times in life when you want a positive protein balance, when you're closer to that 35% of your caloric intake coming from your protein is during seasons of growth. So, like someone going through puberty, for example, or if you're pregnant and growing a whole nother being, you're going to want to have more protein. And also in your recovery stages after illness or injury, because your body is really actively trying to recover. And protein or amino acids are your building blocks for recovery.
In the demographic that I'm in, an old geezer who's trying to stay in shape, my protein surplus I would use on recovery days. I keep my diet the same, but I literally don't do anything to build the muscle that I tore down the previous day with my workout. Is that right?
As someone who is training, especially doing weightlifting like you are, you will want to keep your whole lifestyle towards that 35% of your caloric intake coming from protein because you are recovering always. Anytime that you are having a growth or recovery lifestyle, you want to be more towards positive protein balance. And the recovery, yes, can be training, but like I mentioned, it can be after illness, having the flu, for example. Having extra protein during the time that you're sick and the 2 weeks after will really speed up your recovery process. And that's not only with illness, but it's also with injury. If you tear something or, God forbid, broke something, your body needs those proteins.
Yeah, I got to brag to my physician when I was going through my foot issue that I always kept my proteins and my hydration on point. And he said that definitely helps with recovery. And I can certainly attest to that because I'm back lifting weights in just a few weeks after sort of being in a boot and not being able to put any weight at all on that foot. Now I'm back to leg day was actually yesterday, and I hit some PRs on barbell squat and barbell RDL.
Nicely
Thanks
done.
to my fitness, thanks to my nutrition, all of that, I was able to recover faster. That didn't happen the first time I had this injury. Keeping those proteins up, keeping the nutrition on point is so vital and critical to recovery and just your body just functioning like it should. Say I go on vacay for a few days and try out some new desserts and probably go off my protein balance, probably ingesting more fats and carbs because that's what sweet, tasty treats tend to do. Is there any rebound time? Is there any sense to over protein myself to kind of catch up or just get back into balance that I'm used to, especially when I take a break or go on vacation or, hang out with the dudes and have a bunch of appetizers that I know are not really protein focused?
Well, if you're over consuming sugars and fats, I think you'd probably have more of a calorie problem than a protein problem because protein balance has to do with your protein loss to your protein intake. So if you're dilly-dallying, you're probably not losing that much protein. You're not weightlifting, you're not running, right? With the extra calories in general, you might still be at protein balance, protein equilibrium right in the middle. And when you come back to your normal lifestyle, you'll want to increase your protein to match your increase in protein loss. For a lot of us, we don't track our calories all day. So if you want to focus just on proteins, studies have found that consuming 20 to 30 grams of protein at a given meal has positive effects on, muscle protein synthesis compared to spreading it out, like I mentioned.
Okay, so basically I'm hoarding all of my proteins into the three different meals that I have as opposed to the way I do it now, which is protein in the morning, protein mid-morning, workout, protein post-workout, and then a normal meal. I definitely spread mine out.
So what you're doing is not average. The average American adult has unbalanced meal distribution. One meal will have 60% of their daily protein. So I'm asking the average American adult to spread it out. Again, just based on studies done in America.
I see what you mean now.
And if you are one of those people who are struggling with ideas of how to spread it out, you can go to coachkinsley.com and download our PDF of some sample meals for $5. It's going to be breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. Check it out. Why do you care to be at protein equilibrium if you're living kind of a normal life, or at positive protein balance if you're athletic training or recovering or growing in any way? Because if you do the opposite, if you go into a negative protein balance, there are negative consequences. That's why it's called negative protein balance. You are using more protein than you are consuming. You have inadequate calorie intake per day. Now, this usually happens if you're not consuming enough calories in general. We talked about this in Intro to Protein, but when you look at the protein molecule, there are carbs in it. When you are not consuming enough carbohydrates for energy, your body will take from your protein for energy. If you don't have enough calories, you don't have enough carbs. So your proteins are being used for more than just meeting protein related nutrient needs. It's being used for energy as well. And this can get really bad, right? You can have fevers, burns, infections that last forever. You will keep on losing it until you fix it. So staying within that 10% to 35% range of your caloric intake being from protein is very important. But more than that, it's important that you match it to your lifestyle. If you're an athlete, please have more than 10% of your calories coming from protein. You feel me? What do you say to that, producer Mike? Are you picking up what I'm putting down here?
Coach, I will confess that I was guilty of being in a negative protein balance. When we first started working out and you were putting me through my paces, doing that stupid bear crawl or having me push a sled around, that I wasn't eating enough because I thought, hey, great, I'm working so hard at this. And if I don't eat, then I'm going to be losing weight like a mug. Turns out I was eating it into my own muscle. And I would describe my diet to you, what I was going to have afterwards. And coach was like, you need to get those proteins up. You're going to eat into your work. Kind of what I took that as. If I'm putting in this work, but I'm not seeing the results because I'm not eating enough, I need to change the way I'm thinking about food. And that started a long process for me that I ended up loving a grilled fish fillet. That was a complete turnaround. And so, yeah, that negative protein balance is a real thing. It's something that you don't want to be in, especially if you're putting in the work on your own fitness journey, no matter what level you're at.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. No matter what level you're at, a lot of people go through what you went through, Mike, where they think that I'm going to work so hard and I'm just going to stop eating. I'm only going to have 1,000 calories a day. I consider that not eating. 1,000 calories is not enough. You are going to be burning the wrong things because your body is going to try its darndest to keep up with what you're putting it through. But you got to give your body the tools to succeed. And the tools when you are trying to lose weight by exercising, the tools to succeed in that case is going to be protein and water. But don't get me started on the water. You know I can go on and on about that.
Hydrate, don't
Dehydrate.
All right, coach, we got protein equilibrium, positive protein balance, and we got negative protein balance. So why don't you give us the highlights so I can keep it all together in my brain?
I got you. So, our highlights. It is recommended for 10% to 35% of your total caloric intake daily to be from proteins. If you are in the phases of life where you are growing, recovering, or training, you should have a positive protein balance by being closer to 35% of your total calories coming from protein. Otherwise, you can find yourself at protein equilibrium where you eat as much protein as you are losing through your daily lifestyle. Still within that 10% to 35% of your caloric intake being from proteins. This could be like fish, chicken, Greek yogurt, and eggs, for example.
Fish.
You know I had to say it.
And I'm on board now. It only took
2 years?
2 years of training and a year on the podcast. But yes, it was my entire boredom with protein powders and protein shakes. I'm like, I've got to find a better whole food source. Ding, 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 ding. Coach Kinsley always talked about fish. All right, let's get into it. So now I'm a convert.
That's great. Whole foods are always the way to go. All right, that's a wrap.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Fitness Fix with Coach Kinsley. The fun doesn't need to stop here. Email me at coach@coachkinsley.com. You can check out my webpage, coachkinsley.com, and also find me on Instagram at, you guessed it, Coach Kinsley. Your girl. See you next week. Fitness Fix with Coach Kinsley is a production of Greyhawk Enterprise, LLC.